Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's webinar event. We're going to give just about 20 seconds or so for folks to come in and populate from our waiting room for the webinar, and then we'll get started. Thank you. Thank you again. My name is John Krieger. I'm the Executive Director of World Denver. We're a nonprofit membership organization that facilitates global connection and citizen diplomacy through international exchange, community engagement events, and education initiatives. Along with World Denver, tonight's event is supported across the state by the International Women's Forum of Colorado, the Colorado Springs World Affairs Council, and the Colorado Foothills World Affairs Council. And I'll ask each of our partners to briefly introduce their organization, starting with Tracy Johnson from the Colorado Springs World Affairs Council.
Thank you, John. It is with great pride and pleasure that Colorado Springs World Affairs Council, which began in 1979, partners with these other fine organizations to help everyone learn and support more about Ukrainians in Colorado. It will be a great evening and we look forward to it. Thanks again. Stanley?
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so anyway, on behalf of the Colorado Foothills World Affairs Council, I'd like to really thank the panelists of Ukrainians of Colorado today for taking time out of their very hectic schedule to share their stories with their audiences. I know all of you have very, very busy careers. You have families to worry about in Ukraine, and yet you still find the time to organize a dizzying array of activities in Colorado supporting Ukraine. I volunteered for Ukrainians of Colorado for about the past month, and I know you to be a group of wonderful people, and your contributions go directly to meet the critical needs of Ukrainians. And for anybody in our audience who's interested in volunteering, I can tell you that you will get a feeling of camaraderie with these wonderful people. And also it will help just a little bit to ease the pain and guilt of what you're seeing is happening in Ukraine. Thank you very much, World Denver, for hosting this. John?
And Sandy.
Hello, I'm Sandy Cook, representing IWF Colorado. IWF is part of the larger global organization of the International Women's Forum, whose membership includes more than 7,000 diverse, high-achieving women from 33 nations and 6 continents. We are so pleased that IWF member and Chermak Dillen will be a part of this important briefing. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Each of our organizations have heard from our membership over the last few weeks a real desire to learn more about the human impact of Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine and to find ways to get involved and to offer their support. Tonight's program will feature perspectives from Ukrainians of Colorado here in Colorado, and we will be led in that conversation by Mark Dillen and Ann Chermak Dillen. Mark and Ann are former senior foreign service officers with extensive experience and knowledge of the region. In fact, they were both in Kyiv for Ann's Fulbright until just before the invasion earlier this year when they were evacuated. We thank them for their moderating, and of course we offer so much gratitude and thanks to our panelists for being here tonight and for sharing their stories. Before I hand things over, we do want tonight's event to be a conversation, and we encourage you to submit your questions throughout the program using the Q&A icon at the bottom of your webinar screen. And with that, I hand things over to our moderators and panelists, and I thank you all for being here this evening.
Thank you so much, John, and to all the cooperating organizations this evening. My name is Mark Dillen, and Ann and I will have the pleasure of introducing a really terrific group of people, all of them with Ukrainians of Colorado. We are here really to tell the story, to tell our individual stories, but also to tell the story of what Ukrainians of Colorado is trying to do in these desperate and urgent times. All of our panelists come to Colorado by their own special route. We are of different generations. Those who were born in Ukraine were born in various parts of the country. We have Marina Dubrova, who was born in Dnipro in the east and who came to the United States in 1994. We have Irina Shatalova, who was born in Kiev and came to the United States in 2010. Alexi Drozd, who was also born in Kiev, but came to the United States, I think, as a very young man in 2004. And Lana Fenkanyn, who was born in Chicago, but like my wife, Anne, was raised in a Ukrainian family such that her first language at home was Ukrainian, not English. These individual stories are meaningful in understanding the context of the work of this organization, Ukrainians of Colorado, because each one brings a perspective on the terrible events that are taking place even as we speak. We are now 44 days into this attack on the sovereignty and the people of Ukraine. And we are aware as never before that this is not just an existential struggle for Ukraine as a people, as a nation, and as a sovereign country, but it is a struggle that impacts the future of our world. So it is certainly relevant that we should be having this discussion this evening. I want to say at the outset that there are many, many organizations and individuals and governments doing their very best to support Ukraine, as a glance at the news testifies. And some of that support, obviously, is political military. We see the comments by Foreign Minister Kuleba today in Brussels saying, give us weapons, weapons, weapons. We need those now. We see the economic sanctions that have been added to both by executive order in the US administration and in the legislation passed by the Congress today, in fact. But the main focus for Ukrainians of Colorado has been naturally the humanitarian issues. And it's not the exclusive interest because we organize rallies. We meet with our elected representatives. We try to motivate everyone in a position of influence to do everything they can to help Ukraine at this particular moment of such great urgency. But we do focus on the humanitarian side. And I think from that standpoint, it's fitting that we begin our conversation. I'd like to turn to Marina Dubrova. As I mentioned, she was born in Dnipro in the east, an area under great pressures right now. She came to the United States in 1994. She is a real estate broker, has a successful business here in Colorado. And along with Irina Shatalova and some others, I suspect, back in 2014, decided that there had to be an organization here in Colorado dealing with the issues that were being created at that time by the first invasion by Russia into Ukraine and the annexation of Crimea. So, Marina, if I could turn to you to start our discussion this evening.
Yes.
How is your family doing, first of all? And secondly, tell us about what it was like in 2014 when you and Irina and others started Ukrainians of Colorado. What motivated you at that time to get involved?
Well, first of all, thank you, World Denver organization, for giving us an opportunity to speak out and platform to speak out and present our organization. So in 2014, when with the first invasion of Ukraine, annexation of Crimea, there was a need for organizing some body of not the institution, because we are not members, and there's no membership to belong to our organization. Everyone can belong as long as they feel Ukrainians. But there was a need of some kind of body to bring Ukrainians together, or whoever our friends who supported us. And there were 5 women who were in the beginning of the organization. It's Irina Shatalova, Hrysta Lozanovich, Oksana Bentley, and Nadia Mironenko. And since I have the biggest mouth, I'm still here and just shouting out for the Ukrainians of Colorado. But our purpose was just to bring together the community. We have a Ukrainian church, but nowadays not that many people going to church. So we had to have some kind of different body where it feels everyone feels comfortable. Nobody is discriminated due to the language or beliefs, or so. Like I said, if you feel Ukrainian, you're welcome. And since then, in 2014, we had a lot of support, and we even started to do our festivals, Ukrainian festivals, which had never been done before, and it became tradition. And we felt the need for the community from our people, from our hromada, that's the community in Ukrainian. So we have that feel, and Irina and I, even, we had a Ukrainian radio in 2014, 2015. We had, but not that many sponsors were approached, and so we had to shut it down. But we had very good, interesting programs, and that even people in Ukraine were listening to our radio programs, which last only 1 hour. But they were sending us absolutely high remarks and reviews that they were impressed by the information they were receiving, and that how much Ukrainians in Colorado, in America, cared about Ukraine history, traditions, music. So it was very uplifting. But the war started, and soon enough it just escaped the headlines in the newspaper, and everyone forgot about it. But behind the scenes, the war was going on, and now it's hopefully in the last phase. We still need the unity, we still need the help, and I just want to say how much we appreciate the help and support we receive from our friends in the community. It's impossible to describe, and the amount of emails, the amount of calls we receive with the support and help, offering help, and we really appreciate that. So yeah, Ukrainians of Colorado, maybe it was a very small organization. It is 501c3 approved nonprofit organization, but we weren't as big as we are right now. I think the size of our organization increased by the size of the war we have right now.
Yes.
It's a bad comparison, but we all 100 nonprofit. Nobody has payroll. None of us are on a payroll. So all the money donated, they fully distributed to Ukraine for different needs. it's a medical supplies, or it's help to our Ukrainian army, or now we're going to focus on those kids which were raped in Kiev region, and it's only the beginning. A lot of them became orphans, and a lot of them are right now in the Western Ukraine, and they need our help. So we're going to be focusing also on the targeted help. So we're working on the finding orphanage where we will be directly helping them, kids.
Right.
Finding child or kid psychiatrists and psychologists. So we have so much work to do within the Ukrainians of Colorado, and we still do our regular jobs. So like I said, we don't get paid for what we do. It's our passion. We love Ukraine, and we want to keep doing that.
Marina, I think one of the most noteworthy activities so far in this past turbulent 2 months has been working with Project Cure to give these emergency medical supplies, help that operation down in Centennial. I've seen all of the volunteers going down there and convening and sorting and repackaging and making sure that the medical supplies that are headed toward Ukraine are the ones that they need the most. Could you say a word or two about how that has evolved?
Well, thank you for, you see, there are so many things we do that didn't mean to not mention Project Cure, because we partnered with them, and they're a tremendous help to us. And they're the largest medical nonprofit organization in the United States, headquartered here in Colorado in Centennial. We had already volunteered so many hours at the project, and we're looking forward for more. As soon as we have an opportunities, and donations are pouring into Project Cure here in Centennial and other states. So we really appreciate them. Without them, I think it would be complicated to figure out the logistics, to figure out how to ship it even air. The last month during the March, Project Cure worked very hard to find the pro bono airspace on the flights going to Poland, and that is absolutely, it's more than they usually do. So they're going more steps forward that we even could have imagined. Right. So yeah, that's and great appreciation to them, and we cherish their relationship with us.
That's terrific. I'd like to turn to Irina Shatalova now. Irina, I don't think you and I have talked about this, but you're trained as a psychologist, and you work in the health services sector, so that gives you a real perspective on some of these drastic needs that we see emerging all across Ukraine. And you, like Marina, were present in 2014 getting Ukrainians for Colorado off the ground. Can you just first share with us how your family is doing, how your relatives are doing, and then say a bit more about how you see the work of Ukrainians of Colorado these days?
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Warden, to hosting us for hosting us and to get these opportunities to share our stories. So I moved to Colorado in 2010, and I believe I met Marina in our first Ukrainian festival in 2014. It was a very struggling moment for all of us, and a lot of Ukrainians came, I remember, to Clement Park. It probably was around 300 people. We all stand together, and like Marina said, after that event, we decided that we have to do something for community, for Ukraine, for people in Ukraine. We did a few fundraisers. We started collecting money. We sent 3 containers to Ukraine with humanitarian aid. So we was trying to, in any way, to help Ukrainians. Here we were trying to be with community, to get community together. We did Ukrainians festivals. We did Malanka. It's a New York New Year party, kind of. We brought some artists from Ukraine. So in the same moment, we were trying to send something to Ukrainians, like humanitarian aid. But end of the February, everything was changed. And right now we have huge family who helps to Ukrainians of Colorado. We have different directions in which we have to work. We have PR team. Mark, you represent this team. We have social media team like Lana and Alexi. We have medical supplies teams and logistics team. We have people who help us with government outreach, with business outreach. And it's huge, huge thanks and appreciation from us. My family, my parents finally moved to Poland, but rest of the family stay in Ukraine, in Kiev. My cousin lived in Irpin, and thanks God she escaped in the last moment from the tragedy, which we saw in a couple of days ago. What else? And yes, I have a psychologist background. I graduated in Poland University, Warsaw University. And right now I'm working with elderly, disabled people. And for our also refugees, we would like to start a group, psychologist support group, because we all feel weakness. We're so in stress. I know a lot of people just sleep like a couple of hours a day. We have families, of course, we have kids, we have full-time jobs. But this volunteering for us, it's like escaping from all those bad news from Ukraine.
Right, right.
We have to feel that we do something. We have to feel that we can help them. And those people need to feel that they have background and we are their background.
Right. You know, that feeling of needing to belong, to do something tangible at this emergency moment, you sense it among Coloradans of all walks of life. last weekend, and maybe one of our panelists would like to comment on it, there was a bake sale south of Denver. A Polish, really a beautiful man and his wife, they had made more than 200 Ukrainian cakes, and they were selling them to help us raise money for our work. And it was just 2 days, a few hours each day, but by the end of those 2 days, he had sold more than well over 200 cakes. And you could see from the faces of the people walking in, these were a cross section of all Colorado, people coming, wanting to do something. And that's the way it is with the volunteers that you see down at Centennial, working in the warehouse to package the humanitarian supplies, the medical supplies. And I think that's one of the things that encourages everyone when they see this desire to participate and to do something. So with that, Anne, if I could, I'll mute myself and you turn yourself on.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very
And
much.
we want to hear from our other panelists, Lana and Alexi.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we've got questions now from our viewers, and we want to encourage our viewers to continue with submitting your questions in the Q&A. There's one that here that I think is of concern to many of us that I would like Alexi perhaps to give some thought to, and that is, how do you get the real facts to the average Russian citizens? Most aren't bad people, they just are too willing to believe Putin's lies. Russians are very patriotic, but that is their downfall. Alexi, from your perspective and your monitoring of social media and your following all of this, what would you propose, or what do you think might be done to better inform Russian citizens of the truth about what is happening in Ukraine?
Thank you, Anne. I appreciate the question. Just real quick, I'd like to thank World Denver, IWF, the Foothills, World Affairs, Denver World for hosting us, and just in general, all the people that are here that are not indifferent and come here with open minds and open hearts. We've seen so much support and it's really appreciated, and we really welcome everybody to come and join and stand with us against this crime against humanity. It's been wonderful to see all the support to come together. As far as the misinformation that's happening in Russia, unfortunately, it's a systematic issue. Putin's been working on solidifying his control over his people and control over the media for the last 25, 30 years. It's not an easy monster to tackle. I personally believe that all truth sooner or later comes to light, and it's a matter of time. People want to know the truth, people will find it. Unfortunately, the situation there is such that only people that are out there looking for truth are going to be able to find it. People that go out of their way, and they have big challenges. As far as we go, I think it's important to not engage the people that are spreading misinformation, or otherwise we're giving them the spotlight. It is important to spread the real information out there. To monitor, it is because we live in this world of Facebooks and posts, it is very important for us to monitor what it is that we share. If we are not willing to do the research ourselves to make sure that we're sharing the real information, how can we expect other people to do so?
That's terrific advice, Alexi. And along those lines, what would you like people here in Colorado to know about the place where you grew up?
Yes, Ukraine is very near and dear to my heart. I grew up there, lived there until I was 12. Most of my family, my grandparents, my uncles, aunts, cousins, they're all there. they're all there and they're all taking an active part. I have cousins that have kids that were just born and they're 2-3 years old, and they had to leave them at home to be watched over by the other friends and wives, pick up weapons, and go fight on the front lines. So it's a little hard to speak about, but such is the truth. Some of my cousins have been there since 2014. They have came back and had a medical treatment for PTSD. And yet on the first day of 24th, they got together and they went to fight.
Yeah.
So it's tough. My grandparents are from Lugansk, and they were displaced back in 2014, and they lost everything they had. In very similar situation, my father lived in Irpin, and he had to leave his a household behind to protect my younger brothers that are 9 and 10. So this war has affected a lot of people. It is tough on all of us, and so just to see all this support from everybody, it means a lot.
Yeah, and I think, Alexi, what you've also, what you remind everyone is that Ukraine was invaded, Donbas was invaded by Russia, by Putin already in 2014. And he also illegally annexed Crimea. And in that time, since 2014, over 14,000 people had been killed and 2 million people had already been displaced, including your relatives. So what Putin is doing now is, in effect, a re-invasion, a continuation of this invasion on a much, much greater scale. And that's what we're all confronted with. That's what all of Ukraine now is confronted with.
And I would go further and say it's not a continuation of invasion. On the day of invasion, Putin came out and he said Ukrainians are not a people, that they don't deserve to exist. I would go as far as to say this is genocide. This is a systematic killing, without discrimination to civilians, military, kids, or women.
Right.
Yes, no, that is a very important point. And in fact, 2 days ago, a very disturbing and frightening, I would call it a manifesto, was published in the official Russian news agency that in effect said that Ukrainians should be wiped out, should be eliminated. Mark, you were going to add something.
No, I was going to say this question might sound to some legalistic, but we have now so much evidence that a genocide is being perpetrated that Ukrainians of Colorado issued its own statement, which we gave to all the media locally, and we sent to all the political offices of our elected representatives earlier this week, stating the simple fact and asking them to recognize and emphasize this point. And indeed, I think by now, to our great sorrow, it is being seen again and again, proved as the discoveries around the Chernihiv and around the suburbs of Kyiv are demonstrating. But Lana, I see that you were shaking your head in agreement with what Alexi was saying. So we would like to turn to you, a native Chicagoan, but with very, very strong ties to Ukraine. And when you say in your bio note that all 4 grandparents survived the Stalin genocide called the Holodomor, which was forced starvation in the 1930s. And then they escaped World War II concentration camps to come to the United States. These are such impressive stories very similar, and to your grandparents fleeing Ukraine at the end of World War II. But I wonder, Lana, if you could tell us a little bit more about Instagram and Twitter and what Ukrainians of Colorado are trying to do to get the word out to a broader public.
Yes, absolutely. So I joined on actually maybe just a month ago. I grew up in Chicago, very involved in the community, and I moved out here a couple of years ago. And when the war started, I just started typing into Facebook, like Ukrainian groups. I was like, I just have to do something. And it goes off of what Irina says. We just need to do something, and it helps with our anxiety, and it makes us feel we are making an impact since we cannot physically be there helping them. So I came in, I went to one of the rallies, and I saw one of the members sitting at the table, and I saw they had flyers to volunteer, and I was like, I have to go talk to them. I have to talk to them. So I went up immediately, and one of the first things they said is like, what do you need help with? Because I tried to find them on Instagram and Twitter, and there were older accounts, which is great. And I was like, this needs updating. So I immediately mentioned, I'm on my own account posting about this constantly on Twitter, following journalists, real evidence. And I was like, I can do this for Ukrainians of Colorado. I'm doing it anyway. And, we're in a different generation where things are constantly being shared through pictures and videos rather than just text. And we actually have a very significant following on Instagram. We also have a following on Twitter, but the goal is to not only promote events and rallies through words, but also through pictures and bringing faces to the Ukrainian community. And I think that's important for people to see that we're real people, we matter, and we are here doing this work. I also think with social media, it's super important to keep up with it. There is such a desensitization to information through social media now. And for example, the first 2 weeks, it was very intense. People were reaching out, feeling it, but you can tell it's kind of dying down. So we're here to show that we are still here and we are still keeping up to date with this, because for us, it's still day one. It's not day 44. Like, this is just as important as it was the first day. So we consistently update them every day. We update our events and what's going on and where you can donate, or if you can volunteer and sign up, for example, packaging medical supplies with Project Cure. And I think our following is growing by the day. It's great to get our information out there. It's pretty new, but it's great to see just how much reactions we're getting from people, and people like to see it. It's easier to connect that way nowadays than through just words. So I think it's just easier to reach to people through that. So I'm happy to be a part of this. I'm honored to be a part of it. It makes me feel better. I also have family in Ukraine, and it's really hard. It's very difficult hearing what they're going through, and this is an outlet for us, and this is a community. This is our family. We are all brothers and sisters, and we are all connected, and this is why we're here, and we will continue being here.
That's fantastic. What Anne and I and Marina observed last week at the Denver City Council, there, and at the event that took place at the Babi Yar Park here in Denver, there was, first of all, at the Babi Yar commemoration, it was interfaith. There were two rabbis. There was an ecumenical feel to it all, and everyone, no matter what their background was, whether they were of Ukraine, from Ukraine, aware of Ukraine, they felt connected to that. And we've had in the person of Kendra Black on the city council, Kevin Flynn, who wrote a wonderful proclamation supporting Ukraine. These sorts of supporters, they just come not out of nowhere, but they appear, and
Yeah,
it's a wonderful thing to observe.
it is.
Marina,
There's a, sorry to interrupt, but
no,
there's
no,
a
no.
phrase that we're using that we really like, and it is in honor of freedom. We are all Ukrainian now. And it's wonderful to see all of the support of different backgrounds coming and supporting us. Even we have a consistent Iranian man that shows up at our rallies because we have a history with them, and it's great to see that people. It's great to see that other communities care as much as we do, and we are all Ukrainian now. This is a huge worldwide catastrophe happening, and it's great to see people stepping up and caring and showing their care. We care about, we need it, and we appreciate all of the help and volunteering we've received. It's been overwhelming, as Marina has said. We are consistently being contacted, and the more help we can get, the better, because then the more help we can bring to Ukraine.
You know, I think in the first days of this terror, the first thought was humanitarian, but now we see the tremendous implications for the entire world. And I'm working, and I think many people are working with this simple statement: if Ukraine doesn't win, we all lose. And that is part of the motivation, I think, when you hear the people who have been closest to this as commentators and observers. I think CNN has done a masterful job of covering every aspect of this terrible time. But people come away saying, this is not just Ukraine's fight, this is everyone's fight.
Agreed. I completely agree. And you know, I think we are defending the world right now. And I think people are thinking that Putin will stop at Ukraine. And the reality is he won't. He has such a twisted mission, which we cannot correctly identify, but based off of historical events and his behavior, it's not going to stop at Ukraine. It's not going to stop in Ukraine, and that is why we have to win, and we will win. And even my family in Ukraine says that, like, they have no option but to win. That's why so many people refuse to leave. It's a country of 43 million people, and only 4 million people have fled. Of course, there's many displaced, but people refuse to leave, and my family is one of them. They're just like, this is our country and this is our land, and if we leave, then we lose. And it's a huge patriotic, brave, courageous sacrifice they are making, and we are very proud of everyone over there right now.
Absolutely.
Well, it's also the reinforcement of Ukrainian identity, because that's one of Putin's huge lies, is that there is no such thing as Ukraine and Ukrainian. And I think all of us are working very, very hard to show that there is indeed a Ukrainian identity and a history and a language and a culture. And I think that's something that we need to really focus on and reinforce among our audiences. Would anyone like to say a word about that particular element?
I'd like to say a word. And in general, this conversation that was being had with Lana and Mark is amazing. And I think a lot of people come into this realization that the world is standing behind, that there's no room for this kind of actions anymore. And we're getting united to stand against it. And it's beautiful to see. I think partially because so many cultures have been touched by this war of oppression and freedom. The US, the Jewish people, just in any part of the world, the Iranian, the Georgians, we've all seen it. And so I think this is just the turning point for humanity in general to stand up and say that this is not okay anymore. And as far as the Ukrainian identity goes, it was a big turning moment, starting from 2014. Just the Putin's oppression reignited something within our people, reignited the pride and passion, and maybe with the invention of internet and freedom of information, people are remembering all the atrocities that have happened to our people, from the Holodomors and thousands of years of oppression, and our people trying to establish our own country. And peace in this world has been just a repeating echo of history. And I think this is the time to put an end to it and finally establish it. And so people are becoming more and more prideful and more ingrained. And the more that Putin's trying to stomp him out, the more he is stoking that fire.
And that's the message that we can carry. That's a message that we abroad can carry and magnify. Yes, Lana, you had.
Yeah, no, I'm just going to make one last comment. I completely agree with what Alexi is saying. I also think with social media, we have the option to see all the pictures, all the videos, but these are atrocities that have happened to us in the past. My family is currently hiding in the same cellar my grandmother hid in during World War II. And that is crazy. That it's absolutely monstrous that this is occurring again. And we are now in a time where we have the information, the truth to spread. And that's why we have to continue sharing this information to overpower the propaganda that's being created in Russia.
I just want to add something.
Please, Marina.
So back in 2014, do you remember how long those highlights or headlines in newspaper were about the war in Ukraine and annexation? It didn't last long. Everyone forgotten about that. Putin's officials and Putin's people, oligarchs included, they were keeping instigating, bribing politicians in the European Union, outside of European Union, United States, you name it. So we don't want it to repeat it again. We don't want this war. It's not conflict. Somebody was typing questions. So when the conflict is over, I would like you to remember it's not conflict. It's a war. It's a full-blown war where a genocide is blowing up and out of all proportions. So there is no conflict. It's a war. And then we don't want it to escape or disappear from headlines of newspapers and news channels. We would like to keep it alive as long as it lasts, because the war is the first stage of atrocity, what's going on in Ukraine. The next step, we don't know. Bucha is the beginning of the atrocities. There is another city, what's the name of it? Alexi, Lana, help me. It's worse than Bucha. Borodyanka. It's worse than Bucha.
That's what they say.
It's worse than Bucha. And if you are not familiar with what happened to Bucha, let me tell you. We have right now in the Western Ukraine, 2, 3, 4, 5 years old kids raped, anal, vaginal. Can you imagine the level of the emotional distress for those kids? And they are orphans now. I talked to my friend today in Ukraine. She is in Kyiv. Her cousin is in territorial defense. He's the one who was participating to taking out young girls, young women, bodies out of Russian tanks. So you think about what's going on. It's not a conflict. It's a war. It's a genocide. It's a crime nobody even can comprehend. I'm sorry being so straightforward, but we cannot keep it calm. It's insane what's going on. And I want every one of you on the call here right now to know that. And it doesn't end with what I just listed to you. It's just the beginning atrocities, what they perform on our people. And they keep doing that. So Bucha, Borodyanka, it's a beginning. We still have Mariupol. We don't know what's going on there. It's still blockaded.
5,000 civilians were killed in Mariupol.
Right. Don't forget that theater when the huge letters were in front of the back of the theater saying the kids are inside of the theater.
Yeah, yeah.
So the Russians didn't even think for a second, just they dropped the bomb. They killed 300 people, women and kids. There was no military. So please don't use the word conflict. It's not a conflict, it's a war. It's a genocide.
And I would like to add, 2 days ago, when we saw these pictures, videos from Bucha, RIA, Russian Informational Agency, published. This is official resource. It's not a, like, I don't know, something. It's official resource. They published an article, what Russia needs to do with Ukraine.
Right.
Believe me, when you're reading this, it's like license for killing Ukrainians.
Yes.
It's like all of us are bad, and we don't have to be, we cannot exist. We have to be killed.
No,
I also want
is-
to remind that also backing off of Mariupol, Russians are taking Ukrainians to Russia in
Yeah,
camps.
filtration
Thousands.
camps.
Filtration camps. Does that remind anyone of anything? It is horrible. And these are the concentration camps our grandparents and ancestors survived through, and it is repeating. And this is why it is so important our information and news stays at the top, and that we get this information out, because it is continuing. And as Marina says, Bucha is just the beginning. I cannot even imagine to begin what happened in Mariupol and in Izium and in Kharkiv region. It's absolute atrocities, and we are just at the beginning stages, and we're going to need a lot of help continuing going forward.
It's hard to imagine. I think we have a few minutes left, and we'd encourage anyone who hasn't had a question answered. I think we've answered a few in the Q&A
Yes,
section.
we've answered quite a few, yes.
But if you have another question, now would be a good time to let one of the panelists take a stab at it. I might mention that, President Zelensky has been such a powerful, heroic figure throughout this period, and one could not have scripted such a brilliant communications strategy. And actually, it's larger than communications, but what stands in my mind is hearing the last few minutes, his remarks when he addressed the Israeli Knesset. He quoted Golda Meir, who was born in Kyiv, and she said of the surrounding territory back in, I think, 1967 or thereabouts, she said, well, we intend to live and they want to destroy us. We don't see any room for compromise between those positions. And that, I think, also speaks to the situation that Ukraine finds itself in. There have been a number of negotiating sessions. There have been a number of statements about willingness to negotiate, not to give up any Ukrainian territory, not to forget about the war crimes, but to come to an agreement. And you can see that at this moment, that is not happening.
What I would like to add here in this discussion and suggest and remind all of us is that in addition to speaking out and raising awareness through the publics, through social media, through all kinds of media, it's critical that we communicate to our elected officials. The proclamation that was done in the city council that Ukrainians of Colorado put forward, there's going to be a meeting next week, correct, Mark? And I think they are the ones who need to hear from citizens about their huge concerns as to what is happening in Ukraine and how critical, absolutely critical it is for the United States to provide the military resources that are needed by Ukraine to push back on all of these terrible things that are happening, to take steps to punish Russia for everything that it is doing. So elected officials, I think we
Yes.
all need to engage in that way, all of us
I
listening
see
here.
a question in the chat from Massachusetts. Well, beginning tomorrow, Congress is in recess. I think the Senate's in recess for a week or two, the House of Representatives, a similar amount of time. Your elected representatives will be coming back to your districts, and you should let them know how you feel. If you have a group that is supporting Ukraine, meet with your congressmen and your senators and let them know how important it is to supply this assistance urgently, not in a day, not in a month, but right away, because this is a critical moment for the survival of Ukraine.
I also think the diaspora and the community in New York and New Jersey, which is very close by, is very, very large. If you're able to go ahead and show up in person, rally, and you'll be able to find more direct volunteering opportunities in person. I'm sure just as we hand out information here, I'm sure they have information there. They have been having weekly rallies just like we have been. And physically showing up is a great way to show your support as well. And it's important to do so.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a question here from Anne Harrington. How connected are you to other Ukrainian communities? Do you have a joint strategy? That's a great question. Marina, do you want to tackle that, or Irina?
We have about 2 minutes here, so
okay.
Connected
keep
we
it
are
brief.
to other Ukrainian communities. Do you have a joint strategy? Well, honestly, no, we don't have a joint strategy with communities outside of Colorado, but Irina has a very special relationship with the community in Houston, and we trying to work with them in terms of sending supplies. It got to my attention that the governor of Texas has approved the shipment to Poland twice a week, and it's free of charge. So we're trying to get on their planes our medical supplies, ship it to our nonprofit organization in Ukraine and Poland to reduce our cost for the shipment. So that's the community we work with. We also work with the community in New Mexico, but they're a very small community, but with a very small amount of members there, they do a great job as well. And we are connected on the Facebook.
Looking forward, we will have refugee issues, and we don't have time to delve into that right now. But there are, at this moment, hundreds of Ukrainians along the Mexican border trying to get some sort of temporary parole to come into the United States. So that will bring us into contact with some of the neighboring states as well. Well, Anne and I just wanted to wrap up by thanking our panelists for their terrific conversation. And we'd like to thank also the World Denver, John Krieger, Tracy Johnson, Stan Harsha, Sandy Cook of the IWF, and we'd really appreciate staying in touch with you, and we welcome and are grateful for your support.
Yes, please. Thank you, all of us. This
Thank
support
you.
is urgently
you all.
needed.
Thank you.
Thank you all for showing up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for
Wonderful.
not being indifferent and coming here to listen to us.
And thank you, World Denver, for
Terrific.
putting this together.
Terrific. Slava Ukraini.
Героям
Героям
Slava.
слава.
Slava.